NF, to me, at least in 3 words, is empowering, hard, and everlasting.
NF to me is scary.
Scary.
Frightening.
Incurable.
Tiring.
Exhausting genetic condition.
NF is a tumor-growing condition.
Nerve tumor predisposition.
Unknown.
It's an unknown and unpredictable disease.
Unexpected.
Unexpected because you just don't really know what's going to happen.
It's a very complex disorder.
Genetic disease.
NF is a rare disease and not so rare.
I would describe it as rare.
It's not well, recognized.
Life-altering. Painful.
Awful.
Cruel.
Every day's a battle.
You feel hopeless with that.
Stressful.
Frustrating.
Visible.
Annoying.
Horrible. Horrific.
Heartbreaking.
Depressing. And sometimes happy.
It can be good at the same time as bad.
It's hard because it's so much a part of my identity in both good and bad ways that it's hard to really squeeze that down into 3 words.
It can be challenging, I guess.
Courageous.
Impactful.
Empowering.
A journey.
Perseverance.
Resiliency.
It is an obstacle, but it's also conquerable.
Family.
Community.
All the people you get to meet with.
Connection.
Engaging.
Love.
The Children's Tumor Foundation has built that community, and other families with NF, I feel like they are part of, a larger friendship and family.
Everyone loves each other. We're such a big family.
Interesting.
Unique.
No 2 people with NF are going to be, even in the same family, will have the same experiences.
It makes every person unique, and their story is unique and deserving to be told.
There are a lot of people who have amazing stories in this community that I love hearing.
Optimism.
Hopeful because of all the great work that CTF is doing.
Futuristic.
Complex and fascinating.
Compelling to rock.
Collaboration, because we cannot solve NF without collaborating.
We need to give our patients hope.
No cure yet. And that's the most important word, that 3rd word, yet.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Horvitz, and I'm a former chair and current chair emeritus of the Children's Tumor Foundation. I thought everybody's comments on the video were right except the one. It's not incurable. We wouldn't be here if it was incurable. It is curable, and we're going to do it. And in furtherance of that goal, I'd like to introduce our 2 panelists today. My name's, again, I'm a former chair. I've been involved with the foundation since the early 1990s. But I have very little to say, but I want to hear from our people on this panel. So the gentleman right next to me is Dr. Frank Bono, an associate research scientist and a lecturer in the Department of Psychiatry in Yale School of Medicine. Dr. Bono publishes research on alternative treatment modalities to reduce chronic pain and increase quality of life for individuals with NF. He has been funded by the Children's Tumor Foundation, the National Institute of Health, the Department of Defense for his research on NF. Further to my right is Dr. Ethan Lester, a clinical psychologist at Mass General Hospital, who's an assistant professor as well at Harvard Medical School, and a core staff member of the Center for Health Outcomes and Interdisciplinary Research. Dr. Lester was the lead clinician on the Department of Defense-funded clinical trials for adults with NF1, NF2, and schwannomatosis, and is the creator of a web platform called NF-Web, funded in part by CTF. So we're going to do a few things during our 45-minute session this morning. One is that the topic here is, what has helped the funding of research in neurofibromatosis and schwannomatosis, and how your dollars and other people's dollars combine to help advance our goal of ending NF. So my first question, knowing that we're all a combination of patients, family members, doctors, scientists, and donors, what specifically has CTF done with its funding to advance knowledge and treatments for NF and schwannomatosis? Something that we could use in an elevator speech. Sure. And again, tell us about your experience, but also start by telling everyone what brought you into the field.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yes. Hi, everybody. So I think one thing that brought me in was that I actually have NF. So I was diagnosed at the age of 9. I have NF, NF2-related schwannomatosis, or formerly NF2. Make sure I got that right. And my father had it before he passed at the age of 60. My sister has it. And so I've been living with this for 39, 40 years now. I can talk to you more about, all the plights of having NF and taking a year off of my doctoral dissertation because I was paralyzed. But I think the motivation for me is obviously quality of life and helping individuals with NF who deal with chronic pain. So that's why I got involved. Ethan?
Yeah, great. So I'm Ethan. I work at Mass General Hospital. I'm one of the people probably you've ran into out in the world who had no clue what NF was until getting to my clinical fellowship. And in fact, I just want to say I'm also here on behalf of my principal investigator and director of the Center for Health Outcomes and Interdisciplinary Research, Anna Maria Vrancianu, who really brought me into this area of work. She received initial funding from CTF to start a psychosocial-based trial for adults with NF, went on to gather funding from the Department of Defense, both for adults and adolescents, which we have an active trial for now. And I was the lead clinician on that trial for adults. I've treated over 180 patients with NF, ongoing, still have patients that I see in my clinic as well. It's an incredibly endearing group and, just as a very relevant piece of my work here, really promoted my career to be able to actually do more work in this space. So you mentioned NF Web. It's a web-based platform where we take the live video groups that we've done and actually put it all online as an asynchronous platform. So it's available broadly, and I'm happy to talk your ear off about that at another time. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into this.
Okay. So one of the focuses, obviously, of this panel, because of the background of the panelists, is going to be pain. And pain is an invisible thing. You can see a tumor, but you can't see pain. Patients often feel that doctors and researchers don't really hear them about their pain. Obviously, Frank, having NF2, you get it, okay? How do patients describe their pain and the effect on their lives?
That's a great question because I think one of the videos talks about like we're all unique and we all have different types of pain, and so I think if I have pain, which I do, and if you had pain, it'd be a different perspective. One could be buzzing, humming, tingling, burning, any type of pain. And actually, one of the things that CTF did for me to help me elevate my career was they funded a 2-year project for a Young Investigator Award so that I could help and develop an NF1 related pain measure specifically for clinics to use this measure. And so we just finished the data, the grant just finished down. My team and I are going to be publishing the findings shortly. But in essence, we have a validated assessment that patients complete before they see their doctor, which is about every domain about pain. And so what I'm calling the totality of pain, and looking at that and trying to give them, the doctors, a better, more clear understanding of what pain is and how it affects them. So what are the triggers of pain? What happens what do they try to combat their pain? So in that, is one of the reasons why CTF has been so helpful for me is because now we can actually help patients with this assessment.
Does it have a name?
The
scale?
Yes, thank you for that plug. I appreciate that. There are neurofibromatosis pain module, the NFPM.
Thank you. So,
yeah, I was just going to say there's physical pain and then there's also emotional pain. And I think our trial really attempted to tackle pain from multiple angles. Although, if you look at the data, you don't actually see much change in the level of intensity of an individual's pain from participating in our trials. But you see that the relationship to one's pain, that actual catastrophizing or worsening of pain psychologically does improve. So pain is modifiable. These sorts of illnesses, they don't have true treatments as it were for pain, but in terms of being able to modify the experience of pain, there are interventions that can help.
that's great. I know with respect to what Dr. Bono does, if you can't measure something, you can't really address it properly, and particularly with the FDA looking over your shoulder and trying to determine whether a potential drug is helpful and whether the helpfulness outweighs the harmfulness. So that's going to be a very important thing. So what have the two of you learned so far that is helpful to patients with NF?
That's a tough question. I think probably what I can fall back on as a truism is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. We have this great intervention. We have a web-based platform. We have one for adults, one for adolescents. There's future iterations of this. But each group I ran and each patient I interacted with was different. And I think there's a power in the numbers of getting people together and having a space where everybody can kind of understand each other's experiences. And in that there's hope. That patients who are involved in their care and who can share about their experience can help each other heal. It's not just about going to your doctors and getting the healing from the top down. It's about helping people within the community as well.
I perfectly agree that the idea that pain or individuals with NF have the ability within the CTF community to talk and to come together, and I'm watching over breakfast and how many people are just talking and getting, just seeing that socialization, because you'll have someone who lives in Idaho who doesn't have any resources, in Idaho. I actually was having a conversation this morning with someone from Idaho, or someone from Wyoming who doesn't have any resources, but then able to circumvent that by being here and being able to help. That is a very beneficial from what we do from the psychology standpoint, a significant hurdle for them, to be present, be there.
Yeah, I'm just a little more background. My late wife had schwannomatosis, and the pain issue is so debilitating to people, and I think the people who are here as patients understand it. My mother used to say to me, the problem with Marcy is she looked too good. You don't realize what the people are going through inside because it's not visible. And I used to think about it, the combination of the pain itself, the effect that pain has on sleep, and then the effect that pain meds have on making, depending on what type you're on, can make you a little bit loopy or distracted or whatever. You put the three together, and it's a bit of a horror show, and we've got to do better. We've got to find treatment modalities, and maybe a lot of them are going to be psychological, coping mechanisms as opposed to direct pharmaceuticals.
And then that goes, thank you for bringing that up. That goes into why I think the CTF funding is so important in this regard, in that it provides preliminary research, like Ethan said, and from my research, and there's many other examples of that, of why we need to do research specifically to start up, and because we bring people in who are new to the field. We bring in individuals who were radiologists, but now they want to be specifically related to NF. Or if we want to bring in a pain psychologist, that is something which is critical for us to have, because the more hands we get on, the more eyes, that's going to be beneficial for the individuals who are dealing with the disease.
Yeah, it works the other way too. I mean, the connections that you make as people living with NF. I mean, we're talking over Frank spilling his bacon on the floor today over breakfast, but we're already talking about projects that we can be involved on. So I mean, these sorts of events and these kinds of dollars as they get spent, I think, bring people together and create opportunities to address really unique problems.
What are you looking to hope to accomplish next, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term, I guess?
I'd love for people to type into their phone www.nf-web.org. You don't have to do it now, but there is a resource out there, and I have to look at the traffic that website gets. It's been out for, www.nf-web.org. Happy to get feedback on it, honestly. It's been out for over a year. I did a presentation last year at the NF Summit, and just kind of, I mean, we've run it through a small pilot trial, and it's based on a full efficacy trial. So it means we had over 200 participants participate in the actual parent study, the original study, and we show that there's some efficacy in terms of people's overall psychosocial improvement. So there's a resource out there, and maybe it's not for you, but maybe there's somebody who would benefit from having the skills and the videos and the discussions. So that, I mean, in terms of next steps, I'd love to see people use the resource, but I think we need more research in this area, because while we are waiting for new treatments and an eventual cure, we need to be treating and helping. And I think one of the clearest ways, at least in my mind, is to do it from a social and emotional standpoint.
Yeah, you're not going to get any argument from me on this one. The one thing I'm going to add, though, is that we need to do a better job with interdisciplinary collaborations and doing research. And one thing that I would love to see is like a targeted, grant for interdisciplinary care from CTF or something of that nature, where we could get, Ethan's institution, my institution, and maybe another couple of institutions working together to problem solve pain or, other factors, because that is something that, as Ethan said, we have salumetinib, which can help for PN tumors. That initial research came from pilot dollars, and that it turned into what it is now. If we can get some initial funding or development of, well, let's really take some time and factor into pain and how we can actually help individuals with that, that would be good, because your pain is not going to go away. Or your quality of life is going to potentially go down. We want to see if we can help that. That's critically important.
Mm-hmm. Do you have some ideas for specific studies that could be funded? Because we're always looking for new grant proposals.
I have a yellow book at home, which is thick. It's of ideas. But I think one thing that Ethan talks about is a web-based portal, right? And that is fantastic. I have a mobile app, which is out there for chronic pain. Something in conjunction, maybe. Doing, an evaluation of not just NF1, but also NF2-related schwannomatosis and schwannomatosis, because one of the pre-diagnosed criterion for NF2-related schwannomatosis is chronic pain. 75% of individuals with NF2-related schwannomatosis, it's going to get me. I know it's going to get me. Is chronic pain, and so you need to address these issues.
Yeah. And I posed this question in the Whova app, so I mean, I don't have the answer for where the next steps in research are, but I'm really interested to hear from others and people who are participants in this summit to find out what you want to see research dollars being spent on. You know, I'm biased. I would say let's take care of the whole person. Yeah. Let's take care of the emotions and the social aspect of the illness. But I'm curious to hear what others think.
Perfect segue, because that was my next bullet point. How can the NF schwannomatosis community help? And asking the audience here where they think research should go, because we're better off, you know, positing what sometimes the researchers think a problem is different, the primary problem is different than the problem that the patients see. And what CTF has been very good at doing is making sure that we get patient advocates who can talk to the people in the government, for example, at NIH, and let them know, no, you're aiming over here. This is where we think you ought to aim. And I think it's had a big impact on directing funds to more appropriate studies. So we'll open it up.
Yeah.
And
Or we can keep on talking. I mean, we've
Don't be
got
shy.
two psychologists. We can talk about anything.
We have the risk of talking too much, actually.
Don't be shy. I know there's a lot of questions.
There's a question right here. She's coming with the microphone.
She's coming with the microphone. Hold on one sec.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Wonderful.
And so I
Say that again. Peter Sorman, a neuropsychologist.
The one, yes. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so basically I've been using alpha stimulation therapy, which you may have heard of, with chronic pain patients, primarily veterans and active duty folks. And I've been really listening and toying with the idea that schwannomatosis, or schwannomatosis, and others, NF1, that maybe clinical trials, or at least something can be done in that way. Obviously, it has FDA clearance. It's been on the market since 2010. Yeah. I've treated about 2,000 people so far. So you guys are young.
Yeah.
I just retired. So
congratulations.
Yeah.
I think he just unretired from what I'm hearing.
Well, just.
Yeah, we're going to recruit you back.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. But anyway, it's really fascinating, and I'm a clinician. I'm not a researcher, but I thought I'd throw that out as a potential idea.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing a little bit more on the alpha
stimulation therapy? So basically, what it is these little ear clips that you put on, and the idea behind it is that we train the brain to spend more time in alpha wave activity. So it's also releasing more serotonin to the brain, which is an analgesic for pain. Sure. So it's very typically, how I got started with this whole thing is I was doing 6 hours a week at a VA in Canandaigua, New York, and they needed somebody who had some experience with pain. So this was an opioid clinic. And they just wrote the papers. DOD said, no more opioids.
Yeah.
So it was sort of a clinical experiment while treating patients. And the long and short of it is that a lot of these patients voluntarily backed off on the use of the opioids. And so they give themselves a treatment every day, 30 to 45 minutes.
Yep.
And they're living in alpha. And as you know, alpha, you're focused, you're calm. It's just a very nice thing. Should try it sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like a form of biofeedback to some degree.
Well, that's where I got my start with, but it's different. Biofeedback is something where the patient actually needs to engage, you know, with the help of the clinician in terms of lowering down, let's say, muscle tension, but you can use that with training alpha wave as well.
That's great.
With alpha stim, they don't have to do anything. It does it to them.
It's a great idea, and actually, I'm going to, you know, we'll talk a little bit later. But you know, the idea that
I could come out of.
No, I mean, because great. I've thought about that. You know, like there are other devices that are out in the market, you know, which will do put needles in your ear and provide, you know, electrical feedback in that, you know. And the problem with that is, and I've had a couple of conversations, and we're not MDs, you know, but the conversation is that with, and at least what I've had with several prominent doctors in the NF community, is that for NF1, you know, with tumors being where they are, and then if you are going to be activating certain centers of the brain, you know, NF2 related schwannomatosis and NF2, let's just call it NF2 and schwannomatosis for right now, they both have vestibular schwannomas or tumors that are in the brain. You could activate the growth of them. And so based on what I've been told from others, that's a great idea. I just don't know if it's going to be feasible. But it's, I love the out-of-box thinking. Yeah. Because that's something that can definitely benefit if it could at all.
It always comes down to that cost-benefit ratio.
Of course.
And, you know, but you're right. And I think that is a good question. It's a very important question.
And, you know, I think going back to what you say and what Rick was talking about, the only way that we come up with these ideas is through advocacy. So individuals in this room, you know, come up and say, hey, why aren't we looking more at autism with, you know, NF1 related, you know, NF1, you know, a 30% reoccurrence rate, you know? Why aren't we looking more into that? Well, we are so focused on something else, we have blinders on, we don't see it. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, it's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. Come on, we can get some more questions.
Yeah, what do you think is important in terms of researching? Yeah, what do you think?
Okay, I'm going to speak as a mom. I think there might be something worthwhile, given you both have psychological sensitivity, to helping either through measurement and then figuring out after you measure management of the fear that patients feel going into their audiologists, if you're NF2, going into your MRIs, going into your CTs, God knows how many other things you're going into. Because the anticipation of that is crippling. Mm-hmm. I've seen it, or I've not experienced it. I've shepherded my family through it. And maybe there might be something to help support patients after thinking you guys can spin some good stuff.
Yeah, that's a fabulous point. It's difficult to feel like you're alone and you're not really sure what the next step is. And I think that's the power of having a community is you can ask what it's like to meet with an audiologist or to meet with a neuro-oncologist. And in our program, we have one module that talks about visits with your doctors, and part of addressing that fear is empowering your patients to make sure they know the before the visit questions they should be asking, the at the visit questions, after the visit, follow-ups. And it's amazing. From my experience working on those clinical trials, I think everybody with NF should get an honorary MD. The things you have to know medically about your condition, it's, you know, you're having to learn this really just on the fly, and there's people who have spent years of their lives studying this, and just feeling like you can get the answers and the help you need certainly comes, I think, from a really strong community. I know there was a question back there. I just didn't want to.
Go. Yeah.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Walt, and my son here, Carson, has NF1. And I've been to many of these conferences, and I listen to stories of a lot of people who are living with NF. And it strikes me that pretty much everyone has a story about learning problems. themselves.
Mhm.
And I think that is definitely under-researched in the field. Carson is not on the spectrum, but he's close to the spectrum. And he was just diagnosed with, I think it's called social pragmatic communication disorder. And I just think that we need to it's easy to focus on the most devastating parts, right? We want to solve those issues, but then there's all these other issues that people are actually going through, and it really affects their life.
Totally. I reviewed a grant for CTF that addressed some of those questions, actually, and I can't remember the PI because I think they do a blind review, but yeah, it's a very important question, and there's some really, really talented people in that area of learning and development who are hopefully being recruited into this space more and more.
Can I ask a question? Am I allowed? You actually just said something I thought might be interesting for everybody, which is that you reviewed a grant for us.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that and how that works?
Yeah, it was quite an honor, actually. There was a researcher who had applied for a grant through CTF. I can't remember if it was one of their, what was it again? I think it was either Young Investigator or it was the other clinical research grant that CTF provides. But yeah, I received the packet of review through Proposal Central, and I looked through the documents and gave my own professional and scientific perspective on the proposal. And yeah, it was invited, it was peer reviewed, it was really great. And I felt like it was great too because I felt like I learned a lot from being able to review that grant, not just for my own future career in research, but also as having vested interest in this group as well, to be able to help shape and steer some of the interest in directions, as you mentioned, that are so important. But it was a huge honor because occasionally I feel like, am I the person who should be? But it works out that way.
I want to go back to both these ideas before we go back, if that's okay. I mean, I think that you're spot on. I mean, being in the NF world from the patient perspective, from the research perspective, and from the clinical perspective, I think we do not hit LD, learning disabilities, enough. And I think we need to do a lot more research on that. And, you know, that's something which, you know, and there's that spectrum within LD as well, that, you know, you can go from, you know, completely nonverbal, right, to, you know, just need some help with some executive functioning skills, right? And I think that we need to do better in that. Yeah, I think that's something which is, you're spot on. And, you know, I encourage you to talk to everybody you can. You know, tell your story, tell everyone. I mean, I can tell you that the CEO of, you know, she's right there, you know, just.
Well, I was actually going to put Annette on the spot because earlier you mentioned, Frank, about the fact that you all have similar but different projects that CTF supported you both on. Mm-hmm. And you talked about how can CTF bring some of the folks who are working in pain together, similar to what we've done in previous years in a program called Sonodos. And I know that we've kind of talked a little bit about that, so I was going to put Annette a little bit on the spot to talk about some of what we're thinking about in terms of our focus on pain, because there's a lot more being researched in pain that CTF is supporting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to apologize because I've been lost since I'm on this side. So this was, again, one of my trying to find you guys, but I'm happy I found you. So first of all, in general, and this is before I'm talking about Sonodos, I think one of the important things is that everything that is more like in the psychological space, learning disabilities, cognition, that's an extremely complicated space. And of course it is, you know, you can see a tumor shrink with a drug. But in order to really understand what is happening when you give a drug and what is happening psychologically, I feel strong that I think we will have to embrace the complexity of what we're looking at. And instead of looking at 1 or 2 data points, that we should look at 1 million data points and now finally get this artificial intelligence, machine learning that everybody is talking about into our space. So to your point, we have in our strategic plan that we need to grow this field by at least 5% new researchers. And it may sound little, but 5% is a pretty nice number of researchers. So I think what I would like to invite everybody to is find those smart cookies outside our field and get them into the space, because I think that is the opportunity. And I always say, you know, we're a really cool community. We have money. Where are you, right? So please bring in new smart people into the field, because we can learn so much from the other fields. Talking about Synodos for 1 second. So I call Synodos, for me, is the football model, right? I know very little about football, but what I do know is that if you look at a football team, they don't all come from one place. They come from all over the world, right? There is not only quarterbacks. There is a whole bunch of different people with different qualities. So you need experts from all over the world with very different expertise in order to be successful. And then the third thing I always say is that these football players, to win a game, they don't just run on the field. They have a strategy, and they share their strategy. Yeah. So that is why we launched the data portal, to make sure that people really collaborate and think and share their data out of the lab immediately into the data portal. So this is the whole idea of that Synodos model, is let's embrace those big complex problems, just like winning football teams are doing that, right? So that's my plea to the football team. When we go into the pain space, what would be really cool is we're measuring everything we're doing the whole day on these stupid iPhones, right? So can we now use that data to understand what happens when people are in pain, instead of having to ask a patient, how is your pain today? Because patients don't want to score their pain every day, they tell us. So the question is there anything we can do to look at wearables, right? All this, we walk around, we know everything. I mean, Apple knows everything about how we're doing every minute of the day. Maybe we can use that stuff. So we have an intern actually coming in these couple of days to think about that. So
well, I'm glad you brought that up, because, and I'm going to give you the $20 I promised you later for bringing this up. I just submitted an R01 based on the CTF funding that I got, to include wearable, the Garmin Fitbit, to do heart monitoring for anxiety-based interventions for NF1, in conjunction with my mobile app that does in situ, which means in the environment, in the actual time, that you can record all your stressors. That's what I'm doing. And that's something which, I should hear back, next week maybe. That's what that's the next technology that I want to do, and which I think something which is very important, because as you said, we have all of this around us. We should be capturing everything. We should be capturing, like my social anxiety, because I'm talking in front of you guys. I should be capturing my, how many beats per second I'm going.
Yeah. I was just going to add really quick. I mean, our technology is so powerful and so underutilized. I mean, you look at like what a psychologist might be interested in. Like, do you leave your house, right? There's geolocation you can do, GPS. How much time do you spend on your screen or on social media, and does that affect your mood? I mean, there's just a ton of opportunity within technology, and actually a lot of passive data collection. And that's a great point, that we need to bring in researchers, data scientists, people in industry, people who, actually are really good at understanding human behavior outside the perspective of just two psychologists. There's a lot to be gained, I think, by working together.
I'm looking at my watch, and I'm told we have 3 minutes to go. I'm looking at that clock. It says we have 8 minutes to go, but I heard the production people tell me they needed 8 minutes to change things up a little bit for the next session. How are we doing back there? Go with their watch, okay.
Right, good. Okay.
3 minutes. Anybody else have any anecdotals? Oh, okay.
There's a question right there.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Oh, look up there.
Yeah. Oh, look, it changed.
That's great.
So I don't know if this relates to this session at all, but I noticed, Richard, that you at the beginning mentioned about an elevator speech. Can you elaborate on that? Because my husband has NF1, and even though I've been with him for 16 years, sometimes I don't remember all what to tell somebody when they see me wearing my NF shirt or anything like that, and I'm not with him. So can you elaborate on that?
I would love to take a stab for just a second. Sure. I mean, part of any illness disclosure is understanding your own narrative. And we actually have patients practice that elevator pitch. It's usually 2 or 3 sentences. We're referring to it in terms of our research, so we just don't sit up here and gab all day. But, practice it. It's like an introduction. I am Ethan Lester. I'm a psychologist at Mass General. I'm also an assistant professor at Harvard. See, I'm already messing up. But if you practice this and get an understanding of his understanding, you feel more empowered. You feel like, oh, I can have this conversation without feeling all tripped up about it. Yeah.
And as one of the people said, there's a difference between the elevator speech as to why donors should consider giving to CTF for research, and an individual who's dealing with neurofibromatosis or schwannomatosis, because one of the comments on the video was that each case is unique, so everybody's reality is different. So I think it needs to be customized. If you're talking about yourself, it has to be customized, because they're not really interested in, and I'm sure you're not really interested in telling people how other people are dealing, what they have to cope with. You want them to understand what you're coping with. So I think you have to customize.
So Ethan did a great job talking about the clinical perspective. I can just talk to you about my perspective of having NF, and the elevator speech is great, and I think you need to have that. But I also think you need to be aware of what is going on with you and what is the most troubling. And because, let's be very honest, doctors have a limited amount of time with you, and you need to be able to isolate the most important factor, saying like, okay, I've noticed that my left leg has become harder to move in the last month. Can we go talk about that? So you have your elevator pitch, like this is great, but then you need to also be targeted, specific.
Thank you. We have 12 minutes, or
12 seconds.
12 seconds to go, so I'd like to thank our panelists, and I'd like to thank,
One more.
huh?
What?
Oh, yeah. Storytelling session.
Communicating the mission is right after this.
Oh,
with
heck yeah.
Michelle and
Terrific.
Simon.
That's exciting.
Okay, great.
That's really great.
The clock just started
go
growing rather than
up.
shrinking. So I think we're out of time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
having
guys.
us. Thank you.
Thank you.